February 5th, 2026. You're scrolling your phone half awake, and a quiet headline says, "The last nuclear rulebook just expired." No mushroom clouds, no alarms, just paperwork. But tell me, when paperwork controls apocalypse, isn't paper suddenly the scariest thing? This treaty wasn't poetry. It was a speed limit for two countries holding most of Earth's nuclear warheads in their hands. And today, that speed limit vanishes. So everybody starts driving by guesswork at high speed, and guesswork causes accidents everywhere. Stay with me, because this story isn't about buttons. It's about trust, fear, and the tiny routines that stop panic. I want you to picture a lock on a basement door. The lock doesn't make you safe until someone tries the handle. New Start was that lock. Limits, inspections, numbers, boring checklists. So leaders couldn't lie to themselves too easily under pressure. But now the lock is gone and the basement is full of missiles. How does that make you feel, honestly? Tonight we'll trace how the world built guardrails after the Cold War, and why those guardrails just got ripped out. And at the end, I'll ask you something simple.
Here we go.
Do we rebuild the rules or accept a nuclear free-for-all? New Start ended on February 5th, 2026 after a one-time 5-year extension. No automatic renewals, no extra lives. It capped deployed strategic nuclear warheads at 1,550, plus limits on missiles and bombers. The big systems, not the small talk. It also required data exchanges and on-site inspections, meaning you don't just assume, you show receipts like an audit. When inspections work, paranoia drops. When inspections stop, every satellite photo becomes a conspiracy theory, overnight with a budget attached. So the end isn't only about numbers, it's about losing a shared reality, the thing both sides could point at. The UN called this moment grave for global peace. Not because war starts today, but because mistakes get easier tomorrow. Imagine playing poker, but everyone turns their cards face down forever. How fast do you start assuming the worst every hand? That's the new vibe. Less transparency, more suspicion, more pressure to prepare, even if nobody actually wants war at all. And remember, nuclear planning is slow. Decisions made in calm months by committees can shape crises years later suddenly too. So before we panic, we need context, because arms control was never about friendship. It was about managing fear together. The world worries about miscalculation. One side misreads the other, ramps up readiness, and the other mirrors it blindly too. Without inspections, leaders plan for worst-case scenarios. Worst-case planning sounds prudent, but it creates self-fulfilling rivalries fast. Smaller countries watch the superpowers ditch restraint and think, why should we obey non-proliferation rules then, alone and forever now? That's how the NPT bargain weakens. Non-nuclear states accept limits, expecting nuclear states to pursue disarmament in return. When the disarmament side looks fake, the bargain feels rigged, and hedging becomes a polite word for going nuclear quietly. Europe feels this first because missiles fly over maps, not speeches. Distance is safety, and Europeans have less of it. The Middle East feels it too. If big powers ignore rules, regional rivals start shopping for deterrence like it's insurance. And here's the sneaky part. Even if arsenals don't grow immediately, uncertainty alone can spark arms races surprisingly quickly. So the fear isn't nukes tomorrow. The fear is fog today, because fog is where bad decisions breed, in secret. To see why fog matters, we have to talk about the Cold War concept that still runs the whole system. MAD. MAD means mutual assured destruction. If you nuke me, I can still nuke you back. So nobody truly wins here. It sounds stable, but stability depends on leaders staying rational during chaos. Exactly when humans are least rational and most afraid. That's why second strike forces matter. Submarines, hidden missiles, bombers on alert. Survivors that guarantee retaliation, even after shock. Arms control tried to keep that balance predictable, so no one believes they can grab a sudden, decisive advantage quickly. Because the moment someone thinks, I can win, the system becomes a cliff edge, not a balance beam, anymore, overnight. Treaties didn't remove fear. They managed fear, like guardrails on a mountain road. You still drive carefully, but you crash less. They also built habits. Hotlines, meetings, inspections, routine notifications. Boring habits, but boredom is safety in nuclear politics, honestly, today. So when people say arms control is naive, then I always ask, do you prefer safety by procedure or safety by guessing? Now let's rewind to where those procedures began. When Washington and Moscow first tried to slow the spiral, together, cautiously. And yeah, it started with limits, not love. The first big step was SALT in the 1970s during peak tension. SALT. I was the early attempt to cap strategic weapons and reduce surprise. Think of it as putting a lid on boiling water. One key idea: limit missile defenses too. Because if you think you can block retaliation, you might risk striking first. So, arms control was weirdly about keeping both sides vulnerable enough to stay cautious. Dark logic, but effective logic for decades. The Cold War still had close calls, but treaties created predictability. Fewer sudden jumps, fewer scary unknowns, and fewer rumors. Then the Soviet Union collapsed. Suddenly, nuclear weapons were spread across new states, and everyone's stomach dropped, worldwide. Overnight, start! I arrived in 1991, setting deep reductions and strong verification. It felt like the Cold War ending in math. Inspectors counted missiles, checked serial numbers, watched procedures, and logged everything. Not because they trusted, because they didn't, ever. Verification turned suspicion into scheduled work. Scheduled work is easier to manage than midnight panic, especially between nuclear rivals together. Over time, many Cold War treaties faded or collapsed. But one survived as the last pillar. New START, still standing. New START wasn't perfect, but it kept a ceiling and a flashlight. And in nuclear politics, light matters a lot. Signed in 2010, New START limited deployed strategic warheads to 150 and capped deployed launchers like ICBMs, SLBMs, bombers. It also required regular data exchanges, lists of launchers, notifications of movements, and other little facts that prevent big misreads. And it allowed on-site inspections. That's the human part. People walking bases, checking tags, asking annoying questions, face-to-face. Those inspections don't reveal every secret, but they stop the most dangerous lie. They're cheating massively, so we must race. In 2021, the treaty was extended 5 years. Basically a short delay of doom, unless a new deal arrived. Fast. But the inspection system already had cracks. COVID paused visits, supply chains froze, and the routine heartbeat started slipping too. Then Ukraine happened. War turns transparency into vulnerability, and every cooperative gesture looks like weakness at home, politically, immediately, everywhere. Russia announced it was suspending participation in 2023, and data exchanges slowed, inspections stopped, and trust hardened into ice quickly. So by the time 2026 arrived, the treaty was like a car with the seatbelt cut. The label remained, the safety didn't. Now the question becomes brutal. If the last guardrail failed, why couldn't we build a replacement before it expired? First wall, Ukraine. You can't negotiate trust while you're fighting a war, especially when each side blames the other for it. Arms control needs direct channels, boring working groups, technical teams, and travel visas. War kills boring, and nuclear safety needs boring. Second wall, China. The US says limiting only Russia is pointless if China's arsenal is growing rapidly outside any treaty. US assessments project China could exceed 1,000 warheads by around 2030, changing the strategic balance and planning assumptions. China replies, "Our arsenal is smaller, so we won't join superpower limits yet." Can you see both sides' logic? Russia adds a twist. If China joins, include Britain and France too. Suddenly the table gets crowded and talks freeze. Third wall, US politics. In 2026, voices grow louder saying America shouldn't accept limits while rivals expand, unchecked. Reports suggest Washington preferred a tougher, broader deal aimed at China, rather than extending the old framework again as is. But chasing a perfect deal can mean ending with nothing. And nothing is exactly what February 5th delivered to everyone. So now we're in the gap. No binding limits, no inspections, and a world watching 3 nuclear giants size each other up. From an American perspective, the first priority is deterrence credibility. If rivals doubt U.S. resolve, crises get riskier, fast. Strategists talk about a two-peer problem, Russia and China at once, which makes old bilateral treaties feel outdated quickly. One tempting option is uploading, putting more warheads on existing missiles quickly because the hardware already exists, ready right now. Supporters say that's just restoring flexibility. Critics say it signals escalation and pushes everyone else to accelerate too, immediately. Here's a question for you. If you remove limits to scare rivals, do you also scare allies who depend on stability? Another U.S. argument is fairness. If China won't join limits, why should America keep its hands tied behind its back? But the twist is ugly. Walking away may convince China it must expand faster because it fears permanent inferiority long term. So the US faces a dilemma: freedom to build more versus the costs, money, risk, and global legitimacy at home. And legitimacy matters because the US leads alliances. If allies panic, the alliance becomes louder, shakier, and harder to manage. Now switch lenses to Europe, where deterrence debate isn't theoretical. It's geography, history, and range rings on a map. Europe's first word is proximity. When missiles fly, Europe is closer to the flight path, so predictability is priceless. European security depends on US extended deterrence. The promise that America treats an attack on Europe as its own emergency. When US politics look volatile, Europeans start asking uncomfortable questions about autonomy, burden sharing, and what umbrella really means. That's why you hear talk of a shared European nuclear umbrella. It's still sensitive, but the taboo is thinning. France and Britain have their own nuclear forces, and Russia likes to say, include them too. Europeans hear that as pressure. For many Europeans, arms control is insurance, not peace. Insurance against misreading, overreacting, and stumbling into escalation at night again. And Europe fears fragmentation. If each state hedges alone, you get more nukes, more suspicion, and less collective control overall. So Europe pushes for risk reduction measures: hotlines, transparency steps, crisis drills, even when full treaties feel politically impossible today. Let me ask you, if you lived under that map, would you prefer freedom to build or rules to verify? Now, with US and Europe both uneasy, the future depends on which path wins the next few years and why. Scenario 1. Informal restraint. The US and Russia keep near old limits quietly because racing is expensive and dangerously destabilizing. Scenario 2. An upload race. Warheads increase on existing missiles, budgets rise, and each side claims it's only responding. Scenario 3. Crisis-driven talks. A scary incident forces emergency agreements, maybe not a treaty, but a risk reduction package. Scenario 4. Slow multilateral steps. The US tries to pull China in, but China demands fairness, timing, and smaller obligations first. Scenario 5. Europe recalibrates deterrence debates, pushing harder for its own security architecture as US reliability feels uncertain lately. None of these paths guarantee safety. They're choices made under fear, money, politics, and pride. Exactly the worst mix. So what should a sane world do? Start small. Reopen channels, restart transparency, and treat inspections like fire alarms, not favors. Because when the rulebook disappears, leaders invent rules in real time, and real-time rules often arrive after tragedy, too late. Today's story isn't doom, it's warning. Guardrails can be rebuilt. If publics demand boring, patient safety over dramatic bravado, now tell me, if you advise your government, what's first? Build more weapons or rebuild rules that limit them with verification?